December 7, 1941, 7:55 in the morning. The Hawaiian sun climbs slow and golden over Pearl Harbor, casting long shadows across the oil-slicked water. The air smells of salt and engine grease, of coffee brewing in the galleys of battleships moored in neat rows along Ford Island. Somewhere in the distance, a radio plays swing music, Glenn Miller's Chattanooga Choo Choo, drifting across the harbor from an open porthole. On the deck of the USS Arizona, Seaman James Corey wipes sleep from his eyes and watches pelicans dive for fish in the early light. The water is so still it reflects the sky like polished glass. In 90 minutes that glass will shatter, and with it, the longest period of peacetime illusion America had ever permitted itself to dream. The men of the Pacific Fleet do not know they are living in the final heartbeats of the old world. They write letters home. They plan shore leave. They complain about the coffee and joke about the officers and think about girls waiting in San Diego or Boston or towns whose names dot the American interior like promises of normalcy. Ensign Joseph Tausig, Jr., aboard the USS Nevada, is shaving, methodically, the way his father taught him. Lieutenant Commander Samuel Fuqua is reviewing duty rosters. In the harbor control tower, signalmen track the morning shipping schedule with the casual precision of men who believe Sunday mornings are sacred, inviolate, immune to the geometry of war. They are wrong. High above them, invisible against the morning sun, 183 Japanese aircraft are descending through cloud layers, their engines tuned to a pitch that will soon become the soundtrack of American fury. The first bomb falls at 7:55 a.m. It strikes the water near the seaplane ramp at Ford Island, and for a single disorienting second, the men watching believe it to be some terrible accident. Ordnance dropped by mistake, perhaps from one of their own training flights. Then the second bomb falls, and the third, and suddenly the sky is full of them. Nakajima B-5Ns carrying armor-piercing shells modified from 16-inch naval gun projectiles. Aichi D-3As screaming down in near-vertical dives, their fixed landing gear howling like mechanical banshees. The sound is unlike anything these men have heard. A layered cacophony of engine roar, wind scream, and the peculiar whistle of bombs cutting through atmosphere. Then the explosions begin, each one a hammer blow against the membrane of reality, and the water that was glass becomes a churning fury of flame and debris and drowning men. The USS Oklahoma takes 3 torpedo hits in the first 4 minutes. She rolls slowly, almost gracefully, until her masts touch the harbor bottom and her hull points skyward like an accusing finger. 429 men are trapped inside her capsized body. Some of them will pound on the steel hull plates for days, tapping out desperate rhythms that rescuers can hear but cannot answer quickly enough. The USS West Virginia absorbs 7 torpedoes, 7 separate puncture wounds, each one flooding compartments with seawater and burning oil, and begins to settle into the mud. Captain Mervyn Bennion, mortally wounded by shrapnel from a bomb that struck the Tennessee moored beside him, refuses morphine so he can continue giving orders. He dies at his post, still speaking coordinates, still trying to fight back with whatever guns his sinking ship can bring to bear. But it is the USS Arizona that becomes the war's first terrible icon. At 8:06 a.m., an armor-piercing bomb penetrates her forward magazine, where 1.5 million pounds of smokeless powder are stored. The explosion lifts the 35,000-ton battleship out of the water. Witnesses on Ford Island, nearly 500 feet away, are thrown to the ground by the concussion. A fireball rises to 500 feet, black at its heart and ringed with flame orange. And when it dissipates 9 minutes later, the Arizona is gone. Not sunk, but consumed. Her forward hull collapsed, her superstructure demolished. 1,177 men entombed within her. The ship burns for 2 days straight. Oil leaks from her ruptured tanks even now, decades later, a slow bleeding that has never stopped. 1 quart every day, rising to the surface like memory that refuses to be submerged. The Japanese pilots expected chaos, but they did not expect this particular flavor of it. The speed with which training overcomes shock, the way these American sailors, many of them barely 20 years old, find their stations through smoke and flame and begin to fight back with whatever they have. On the USS Nevada, the only battleship to get underway during the attack, Ensign Tausig, the same young man who was shaving when the first bombs fell, loses his left leg to shrapnel but refuses to leave his anti-aircraft gun. He keeps firing, one-legged, balanced against the gun mount, until he finally collapses from blood loss. Chief Boatswain Edwin Hill, after helping to get Nevada moving, jumps overboard and swims back to his mooring station to release the lines from another ship. He is strafed while swimming. His body is never recovered. Commander Mitsuo Fuchida, leading the first wave of Japanese aircraft, circles above the carnage and watches the American response coalesce with a speed that troubles him. He has studied American culture extensively. He has read about their jazz music, their automobiles, their Hollywood films, all the soft luxuries of a democracy he has been taught to regard as decadent. He expected softness to translate into paralysis. Instead, he watches anti-aircraft fire intensify by the minute, watches damage control parties emerge from impossible situations to save ships that, by all logic, should already be lost. The USS California, hit by 2 torpedoes and flooding badly, should sink. But counter-flooding efforts, the deliberate flooding of compartments on the opposite side to prevent capsizing, keep her upright long enough for most of her crew to escape. The USS Maryland, protected by the outboard mooring of the Oklahoma, takes only 2 bomb hits and remains combat-capable. Even the dying ships fight back. Men trapped below decks pass ammunition hand to hand to guns still firing above them. The Japanese have planned this attack for 11 months. They have trained over Kagoshima Bay, whose topography resembles Pearl Harbor, practicing shallow-water torpedo runs until they can thread the needle in near-total darkness. They have modified their Type 91 torpedoes with breakaway wooden fins that allow them to function in the harbor's 40-foot depths. Shallow water that American commanders had believed made the anchorage immune to torpedo attack. They have timed their arrival to coincide with the moment when most American aircraft would be grounded. Most anti-aircraft ammunition locked away in peacetime storage. Most officers ashore or at late Saturday night parties. The attack is a masterpiece of operational planning, executed with precision that military historians will study for generations. And yet, even as the second wave of Japanese aircraft arrives at 8:40 a.m. to press the attack home, Fuchida feels the first cold touch of strategic doubt. The American aircraft carriers are not here. Enterprise, Lexington, and Saratoga, the 3 carriers of the Pacific Fleet, are elsewhere, delivering aircraft to Midway and Wake Island, or in port on the West Coast. The Japanese have destroyed battleships, and battleships are impressive monuments to naval power. But Fuchida knows, in a way that many of his superiors do not yet fully grasp, that the future of naval warfare belongs to the carrier. The battleships burning below him are the past, magnificent and obsolete. The carriers, absent and untouched, are the future. It is a future that will hunt him across the Pacific. The attack lasts 110 minutes. By 9:45 a.m., the last Japanese aircraft has disappeared to the north, returning to the carrier fleet waiting beyond the horizon. In that hour and 50 minutes, 21 American ships have been sunk or damaged. 188 aircraft have been destroyed, most of them caught on the ground in neat rows, parked wingtip to wingtip as a precaution against sabotage, never imagining that the real threat would come from the sky. 2,403 Americans are dead. Another 178 are wounded. The numbers are staggering, but they are also incomplete. They do not capture the smell, burning oil and burning flesh mixed with cordite and seawater. They do not capture the sound, men screaming in compartments filling with water, metal groaning as ship superstructures collapse, the particular crackling roar of a petroleum fire consuming oxygen faster than men can breathe. They do not capture the sight of the harbor water, its surface covered in a slick of oil that burns in patches, transforming the harbor into a landscape of isolated fire islands that men must swim between, gambling with each stroke that they will reach clear water before the flames shift. In Washington, D.C., it is 1:47 p.m. when the first confirmed reports reach the White House. President Franklin Delano Roosevelt, meeting with his closest advisor Harry Hopkins, receives the news while sitting in his study. For a long moment, he says nothing. Then, in a voice described by witnesses as cold and utterly steady, he says, "They have attacked Pearl Harbor. We are at war." He will spend the rest of the day calling congressional leaders, reviewing casualty reports, and beginning to draft the speech he will deliver tomorrow, the speech in which he will call December 7th, a date which will live in infamy. But in that first moment, sitting in his wheelchair in the winter light of the White House study, Roosevelt understands something profound. The American people, divided over isolationism, weary of Europe's wars, determined to remain apart from the world's conflicts, have just been handed the one thing capable of unifying them completely: a shared enemy and a justified rage. The Japanese High Command celebrates. Admiral Isoroku Yamamoto, architect of the attack, is more circumspect. He has lived in America, studied at Harvard, served as a naval attaché in Washington. He has seen the industrial capacity of Detroit, the steel mills of Pittsburgh, the oil fields of Texas. He has walked the streets of American cities and understood something that many of his colleagues, insulated by ideology and distance, have not grasped. America's wealth is not merely material. It is systemic. It is renewable. It is tied to a social and economic engine that, once fully engaged, can outproduce any nation on Earth. "I fear all we have done," Yamamoto allegedly says, though the quote's authenticity is debated, is to awaken a sleeping giant and fill him with a terrible resolve. Whether he spoke these exact words or not, the sentiment proves prophetic. America in 1941 is a nation of contradictions. It has emerged from the Great Depression still bearing the scars. Unemployment, though improving, remains high. Factories still operate below capacity. Millions of men remain desperate for work. Yet beneath this surface weakness lies a latent power unprecedented in human history. America has the world's largest steel industry. It produces more oil than every other nation combined. Its automotive industry, born in Detroit's machine shops, has created assembly line techniques that can manufacture complexity at scale. It has a population of 133 million, many of them skilled workers who have learned precision manufacturing in automobile plants and electrical factories. What it lacks is a reason to mobilize. Pearl Harbor provides that reason in 90 minutes of fire and smoke. The transformation begins immediately. On December 8th, Congress declares war with only one dissenting vote, Representative Jeanette Rankin of Montana, a pacifist who voted against entry into World War I as well. Within days, recruiting stations are overwhelmed with volunteers. Men line up for blocks, in winter cold, to enlist. Some of them are veterans of the First World War, now in their 40s, lying about their age to get back in. Many are teenagers, lying upward about theirs. They bring with them the anger of Pearl Harbor, a focused fury that transcends regional differences, class divisions, and political affiliations. The South and the North, rural and urban, immigrant and native-born, all these categories that have divided American society become secondary to a single shared identity. They are Americans. They have been attacked, and they will respond. The industrial mobilization that follows is a phenomenon without historical parallel. In 1940, American factories produced 309 military aircraft. In 1944, they will produce 96,000. In 1941, the United States Navy has 7 aircraft carriers. By 1945, it will have 99. The automobile factories of Detroit convert to tank production. The same assembly lines that built Chevrolets and Fords now build Sherman tanks and M4 Wolverines. Henry Ford's Willow Run plant, built specifically for B-24 Liberator bomber production, reaches a peak output of 1 aircraft every 63 minutes. A 4-engine heavy bomber, complex as a small city, rolling off the line faster than most modern cars. The scale is staggering, but the scale is the point. America does not merely respond to Pearl Harbor. It buries the memory of Pearl Harbor beneath a mountain of production that no enemy can match. The soldiers and sailors America sends into the Pacific carry with them this abundance. Japanese soldiers, products of a resource-poor island nation disciplined by scarcity, encounter American forces supplied with a logistical generosity that shocks them. Captured documents and prisoner interrogations reveal the same theme repeatedly: disbelief at American material wealth. A Japanese officer's diary recovered from Guadalcanal describes finding American supply dumps containing not just ammunition and rations, but cigarettes, cartons of them, fresh and intact, distributed freely to frontline troops. Another diary entry marvels at captured American K-rations, pre-packaged meals containing meat, crackers, chocolate, and coffee, each soldier receiving 1 per day as a matter of course. Japanese soldiers, often subsisting on rice and pickled vegetables, supplementing their rations by foraging or starving, cannot comprehend an army that feeds its troops chocolate as standard issue. The chocolate becomes a symbol, small and mundane, yet profound. The Hershey Company, in partnership with the U.S. Army, develops the D-ration, a 4-ounce chocolate bar designed to withstand high temperatures without melting. Packed with 600 calories, intended as an emergency ration. It tastes, by deliberate design, only slightly better than boiled potatoes. Good enough to sustain, not so delicious that soldiers eat it casually. But even this utilitarian chocolate represents something larger. An economic system so productive that it can afford to wrap calories in individual foil packages and distribute them to millions of soldiers across 2 oceans. Japanese soldiers, finding these chocolate bars in captured supplies or on the bodies of dead Americans, hold in their hands the material proof that they are not fighting an enemy weakened by luxury, but an enemy whose luxury is itself a weapon, evidence of industrial and agricultural capacity beyond their nation's ability to match. The Pacific War becomes a grinding tutorial in this disparity. At Guadalcanal, American forces land with inadequate supplies and suffer accordingly, but the supply chain corrects, adapts, and grows. Within months, Henderson Field receives daily cargo flights. Within a year, the logistical apparatus supporting the Solomon Islands campaign has achieved a rhythm of resupply that Japanese commanders, reading intelligence reports, dismiss as impossible. Their own supply lines, stretched thin across thousands of miles of ocean, harassed by American submarines, prove increasingly incapable of sustaining forward units. Japanese soldiers call their supply runs rat runs, destroyers racing down the slot at night, trying to deliver men and materiel before American aircraft can interdict them at dawn. Success is intermittent. Failure is costly. The contrast with American logistics, where LSTs waddle ashore in daylight to disgorge tanks and trucks and pallets of supplies, could not be starker. At Tarawa, the U.S. Marines suffered terrible casualties, 1,000 killed in 76 hours. But the American response is not despair. It is analysis. The military studies what went wrong, redesigns amphibious doctrine, improves equipment, and applies the lessons at Kwajalein, then at Saipan, then at every subsequent landing. The Japanese watch this adaptive capacity with growing dread. They have been taught that Americans are soft, individualistic, incapable of sacrifice. But the Marines wading through chest-deep water into machine gun fire at Tarawa are not soft. The sailors staying at their posts on burning carriers at Midway are not soft. The soldiers fighting cave to cave in the volcanic hell of Iwo Jima are not soft. The ideology that sustained Japanese morale, the belief that spirit could triumph over material, that Japanese virtue could overcome American decadence, erodes with each defeat, each captured supply dump, each encounter with an enemy that refuses to behave according to the script. The 90 minutes that began at 7:55 a.m. on December 7, 1941, set in motion a war machine that will not stop until Japanese cities burn, and the imperial government surrenders unconditionally. But the machine is more than metal and explosives. It is ideological. Every bond drive, every rationing program, every victory garden planted in American backyards feeds into a collective narrative. We are fighting for something beyond territory. The chocolate bars, the cigarettes, the pre-packaged meals, all these mundane items become signifiers of a system that, for all its flaws, produces abundance not just for elites, but for common soldiers. Japanese troops, told they are fighting to liberate Asia from Western imperialism, face American soldiers who carry in their packs more food than some Japanese families see in a month. The cognitive dissonance is profound. At Leyte Gulf, the largest naval battle in history, the Japanese fleet arrives outnumbered and outgunned. They have no choice. Their fuel reserves are critically low. Their doctrine, emphasizing decisive battle, demands engagement even when conditions are unfavorable. The American fleet they face has been built, in large part, since Pearl Harbor. Carriers constructed in the vast shipyards of Newport News and Brooklyn, crewed by men trained in accelerated programs, supplied by a logistics train that stretches back to farms in Iowa and steel mills in Pennsylvania. The Japanese lose 4 carriers, 3 battleships, 10 cruisers, and 11 destroyers. American losses are lighter, but the disparity is not merely numerical. It is existential. Japan cannot replace these losses. America already has. Commander Fuchida, the man who circled above Pearl Harbor in the attack's opening minutes, survives the war. He flies at Midway, where the Japanese lose 4 carriers in a single day. June 4, 1942, barely 6 months after Pearl Harbor, the day the tide turns irrevocably. He is wounded at Hiroshima, recovering in a hospital when the atomic bomb detonates. In the war's aftermath, he converts to Christianity and spends the rest of his life preaching pacifism, traveling across Japan and eventually to the United States, speaking about the futility of war. In his writings, he returns repeatedly to the image that haunted him from the beginning: the speed with which American resistance organized itself at Pearl Harbor, the anti-aircraft fire intensifying even as ships sank, the men who kept fighting when fighting seemed hopeless. "We thought we were attacking a soft target," he writes. "We did not understand that hardness and softness are not about comfort. They are about will." The oil still leaks from the USS Arizona. The memorial built above her submerged hull draws millions of visitors, many of them Japanese, many of them too young to remember the war, but old enough to understand its shadow. They look down through the clear water at the rusted turret, the barnacle-encrusted hull, the names engraved on the marble wall: 1,177 men who never came home. The oil rises around them, iridescent in the sunlight, a slow bleed that has continued for more than 80 years. Some call it the ship's tears, others call it the blood of memory. Both are correct. The 90 minutes that began at 7:55 a.m. on December 7, 1941, were intended to cripple American naval power in the Pacific. They succeeded tactically. 8 battleships sunk or damaged. But tactics are not strategy, and strategy is not destiny. The battleships were old, some of them veterans of World War I, magnificent but obsolete. 6 of the 8 would be raised, repaired, and returned to service, a feat of salvage engineering that Japanese planners had not anticipated. The carriers, the future of naval warfare, were untouched, and beneath the tactical success lay a strategic catastrophe. Japan had unified its enemy, transformed American public opinion overnight, and guaranteed that the full industrial and human resources of the world's most productive economy would be directed toward a single goal: unconditional victory. Yamamoto, the architect, understood too late. Or perhaps he understood from the beginning and proceeded anyway, constrained by a military culture that valued honor over pragmatism, decisive action over strategic patience. He dies in April 1943 when American P-38 fighters, guided by decrypted Japanese communications, intercept his transport aircraft over Bougainville. The shootdown is a targeted assassination, approved at the highest levels of the American government. Revenge, perhaps, for Pearl Harbor, but also the elimination of the Japanese Navy's most competent strategist. His death is symbolic. The man who awakened the giant is killed by the giant's response. A long-range fighter escort mission made possible by the industrial capacity to design, build, and deploy advanced aircraft across thousands of miles of ocean. The Japanese soldiers who survived the war and returned home carried with them memories that contradicted the propaganda they had been fed. They had seen American supply depots in the Philippines stocked with food, medicine, and equipment in quantities their own military could never match. They had fought American units that, even when pushed back, regrouped and counterattacked with fresh reinforcements and artillery support that seemed inexhaustible. They had watched American aircraft fill the skies in numbers that blotted out the sun, wave after wave, day after day, until Japanese air defenses simply collapsed from attrition. And in the war's final months, they had huddled in shelters while B-29 superfortresses, each one a technological marvel carrying 5 tons of incendiary bombs, turned Japanese cities into infernos. The bombers flew at altitudes Japanese fighters could barely reach, protected by an air defense network overwhelmed by sheer numbers. This was not the soft, decadent enemy they had been promised. This was industrial warfare refined to its purest, most terrible form. In the end, the 90 minutes at Pearl Harbor matter not because of what Japan destroyed, but because of what it created: a unified American purpose backed by unmatched productive capacity. The chocolate bars distributed to soldiers, the oil leaking from the Arizona, the carriers built in shipyards working 3 shifts a day. All these are threads in a larger tapestry, a pattern of industrial democracy mobilized for total war. Japan had bet that America would lack the will to fight. They mistook abundance for weakness, comfort for cowardice, individualism for disunity. They learned otherwise in the waters of the Coral Sea, at Midway, on the beaches of 100 Pacific islands whose names became synonyms for sacrifice: Tarawa, Peleliu, Okinawa. The sun that rose golden over Pearl Harbor on December 7, 1941, at 7:55 a.m., rose on a world that no longer exists. The isolationist America, the reluctant giant, the nation content to let Europe and Asia settle their own conflicts, that America died in 90 minutes of smoke and fire and drowning men. What emerged from the flames was something different. A superpower willing to project force across 2 oceans, to outproduce any adversary, to sustain a war machine that would not rest until victory was absolute. The Japanese planners who conceived the Pearl Harbor attack sought to buy time, 6 months, perhaps a year, to consolidate their conquests in Southeast Asia before America could respond. Instead, they bought themselves 3 years and 8 months of attritional war against an enemy that grew stronger with every passing month, that learned from every defeat, that buried its mistakes beneath waves of production and sent its sons forward with chocolate in their packs and fury in their hearts. The oil still leaks. The memorial still stands, and the lesson, written in blood and steel, and the Pacific Ocean's depths remains, 90 minutes can awaken a giant, but giants, once awoken, do not easily return to sleep. They reshape the world according to their strength, and in that reshaping, the old certainties burn away like morning mist before the sun. Japan bet on American weakness and discovered American will. They struck at Pearl Harbor expecting paralysis, and received instead a mobilization that ended with mushroom clouds over Hiroshima and Nagasaki. With Tokyo in ashes, with their empire dismantled and their ideology shattered. The 90 minutes that began at 7:55 a.m. on December 7, 1941, were the most costly minutes in Japanese history. Not because of what was destroyed that morning, but because of what was unleashed in response. And somewhere beneath the waters of Pearl Harbor, in the darkness where 1,100 men still stand eternal watch, the Arizona bleeds its slow reminder that some wounds never heal, that some mornings never end, and that the fury born in fire and water can reshape the course of human history, one terrible, inevitable hour at a time.